Well, hello everybody, welcome back to 2C TV with the latest update and the latest scandal. This time we go to Scotland, the Scottish National Party, and the former leader of the SNP, Humza Yousaf. In this video, we're going to give you guys the latest update on a new investigation after Humza Yousaf, as the former First Minister of Scotland, donated £250,000 to the Gaza Islamists. Alright, it's not looking too good for Humza, for the Scottish government, and for the SNP as a party. If you guys remember, a few months ago, last year, so November 2023, so following the October the 7th attack and everything else, the invasion of Israel, instead of actually showing sympathy when it comes to the Jews who were essentially attacked and kidnapped by Hamas, Humza Yousaf decided to take the other side, obviously because he's got relatives in Gaza, and especially his wife's family members as well. Some of them were stuck in Gaza, so he was freaking out. But then he decided, and his government decided, to send more money to the UN agency in Gaza, the UNRWA, the controversial and disgraced UN agency that has now been exposed. Even at the time, it was already exposed to be corrupt, but obviously Humza Yousaf doesn't care about that, considering the UNRWA was basically collaborating with the Islamists, the rest of the Islamists, who used their tax money to, obviously British tax money, to do this. Now, the way he did this, he decided to override the Scottish government officials to give £250,000 to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, despite the advice, the official government advice from the state, saying this is not a good idea. And they said, well, maybe we could have a conversation about 100,000, something like this, going through the official channels, not going rogue. But he said, nope, I am First Minister of Scotland. I am the King of Scotland. I will decide. Let's not forget, all this essentially is still the fault of Tony Blair with his idiotic devolution plans that basically gave too much power and arrogance to these first ministers, whether it was in Wales with Mark Drakeford, or of course Humza Yousaf, or before him Nicola Sturgeon. Now, Humza Yousaf stepped in after government officials recommended 100,000 to 200,000 donations through the actual official channels to UNICEF, the United Nations agency that provides humanitarian aid to children, to fund water programs in Gaza. He said, no, I want to give it specifically directly to the UNRWA. Now, a lot of people were confused, saying, why do you care so much about that specific entity and agency? Why do you not want to do through official channels to go, for example, UNICEF? Not that I'm not even defending UNICEF, because even those guys are wasting so much money and there's a lot of corruption. But if he really cared about children in Gaza, firstly, why do we have a Scottish government using the rest of the British tax money, most of it coming from England, deciding on behalf of everybody else? You're not the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You're not. That's one main issue anyway, forgetting about the actual decision he made. It later emerged, according to Times, that the donation came from the International Development Fund, a £10 million fund that is meant to be ring-fenced for projects in 4 partner countries, so Malawi, Rwanda, Zambia, and Pakistan. Then they opened the door to complete chaos and a massive mess, because not only he didn't go to UNICEF, not only he didn't consult the British government in Westminster, he took English tax money basically, he took the money from the International Development Fund that was supposed to be, again, whether you agree with the whole foreign aid nonsense or not, that was made for those 4 countries. Not for Gaza. Not for the UNRWA. Now, I'm absolutely fascinated by the fact that this has been going on for a while now, but the corporate media are not really that interested in reporting this. I remember the couple of days ago, the BBC mentioned it for about 45 seconds, and that was it. They had it on their website, but you had to go to like a third page and one of the pages for politics, and then you could find it for like a very short period of time, and that was it. That's the other problem. You can't have accountability if the media are not doing their job. Well, obviously, we are doing our job, and we have more viewers than the mainstream media. So at least the message is getting out there now. People now know what's going on. Scottish Government spokesperson has now said that the review, which will focus on evolving future Scottish Government humanitarian funding mechanisms and processes, will be announced in due course. Why do we even need a review? So the overall concept of foreign aid, whether you agree with it or not, the power goes to Westminster, the British government, on behalf of the whole kingdom. The Prime Minister will decide that. Sometimes you might like the decision, sometimes you might not like the decision. They might cut it, they might increase the funding for foreign aid, right? It's not the job of the First Minister of a devolved administration in Scotland to do that. There's no need for any review. Just shut it down. When you have a devolved administration, now that technically also includes Greater London and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. That's a devolved administration, basically. They don't call it that, but it is. So Greater London, Scotland, Wales, all these places, Greater Manchester. You guys have very specific problems locally. It's not necessarily Downing Street working not just on behalf of the whole of the UK, but Downing Street is also part of the international community. Prime Minister will also have to go on the international stage. Again, you might agree or disagree with some of the decisions they make on an international level, but that makes sense because you're representing the UK as Prime Minister. The Mayor of London, the First Minister of Scotland, these guys, they have a very specific job. Local issues in your territory. You have problems, homelessness, childhood issues, educational issues, of course, health problems with the NHS. And you're using tax money that you're taking from other people who don't live in those devolved administrations. Like people in Cornwall are paying taxes. And of course, Sadiq Khan and Humza Yousaf will take those taxes to give it to a different country. And not a friendly country, not an ally, an enemy. Enemy of the West. It's not like us giving money to, I don't know, France. France is an ally, technically, right? Or Israel. They're an ally. Given to Gaza. Really? There's so many issues with this whole story that needs to be addressed. Mike says, oh dear, was useless Yousaf caught writing a white paper or talking to white people, but still, was he seen petting a white cat or Bamban? Bamban is not white. It's very grey and a bit ginger. Joe says, thank you for the super chat. They should investigate Khan as well. I'm sure they will find loads of dirt on him. Oh yeah. There have already been some investigations about money going missing and being wasted, whether it's TfL and other organizations as well. But none of these investigations get anywhere. None of these inquiries get anywhere. What happened to the white mother in law? Oh, her so-called last video from Gaza. No idea. Let's see what else there others are saying. Celia says, human yourself, and Lamy both. Is that Humza? Humza Yousaf and Lamy. Yeah. Humza Yousaf and David Lamy both must be exposed, corrupt, and prosecuted. According to Celia. Old Man on Guitar says, I did say council tax will go to Gaza and independent MPs will be at it next. Exactly. We now have this new block of MPs, of course, the Islamist ones who are being led by Jeremy Corbyn. They are all technically independent, but in reality they're not. They are basically a new, smaller party led by Jeremy Corbyn. And of course they're going to cause trouble in the House of Commons and taking local tax money for other things. Humza Yousaf doesn't care about Scotland. That's exactly the whole point and the problem. You know, generally speaking, forgetting about agreeing or disagreeing with his domestic policies. At the time, obviously, he's no longer First Minister. At least do something for the local people in Scotland. Kenneth says, primary purpose of foreign aid usually is funding bribes. Yeah, usually that's basically the case. If you really care about developing countries or underdeveloped countries, the third world, the best way is, as long as they are an ally, as long as they're a friendly country, don't deal with the enemy. The best way is trade. Just trade. That's it. You don't give them handouts. Never fixed any problems. We've been doing it for a century. It doesn't work. It's not our job to build other countries when we already have enough problems here. Linda says, so both him and Nicola Sturgeon are basically stealing taxpayers' money for whatever they want. It's a total bloody disgrace. They should both be in prison. Nothing came of Sturgeon's investigation. That's still ongoing. That's been the longest investigation in the history of police investigations we've seen. And I was being very patient until now, over the last 2-3 years, because I said, well, the police are reassuring us that the reason this has been delayed is because they are doing their jobs, and there's a lot of details with Nicola Sturgeon's missing money investigation. But at this point, I'm like, surely you have all the evidence. What are you working on? Is it just delayed tactics? Is it now the case is going to disappear without telling the public? What are they actually doing? They haven't even dismissed the case. Decide what you're doing. Humza useless is not Scotland and never will be. He never even cared anyway. He has a problem because the majority of people in Scotland are white. He literally made a speech about that. Did they name the tunnels that Scotland paid for after the Scottish? No. Anyway. The whole thing's crazy. James says nothing will happen. The SNP are a law unto themselves untouchable. This is the thing. The problem with the SNP in government is that just like what we're going to have with the Labour government now in the UK, is that civil service, both in Scotland and in the UK in Westminster, are on the side of those parties. So when the Tories were in power, and not to make excuses for the Tories, because they were still responsible as ministers, but a lot of the problems that government ministers had and they didn't get anything done, a lot of it was because civil servants were blocking them and they were creating obstacles. Whereas now they're loving this whole new work that they have to do with Keir Starmer. They've been loving cooperating with the SNP. They're very easy going when it comes to that. Matthew's, I think, talking about the comments that get disappeared by the AI. It's very random. Sometimes messages go through with robust language as it should be. Other times not. I always have to check my comments after I send them, as half get deleted. Make sure when you're on the live chat on the top, click on not top chat, live chat. Then you can see most of the other comments as well. But I know, yeah, sometimes the AI it just removes instantly and automatically. Chopper says, you may steal our taxes, but you'll never take our freedom. Full of Braveheart. Karen says, the first thing Yousaf did when arriving into his office as First Minister was to have a prayer with his family. Not just to have prayer with his family, he did something else. He did a prayer, which, by the way, in almost all religions is supposed to be quiet and in peace, right? Private. Especially the Islamic side, they're supposed to be just like, this is my time with my God, all that, right? He did something else. While they were doing that, they brought photographers into the room to take pictures. Like a publicity stunt. That was the first thing he did as First Minister. It's complete chaos. Absolute shambolic. Heather says, calm win. We got rid of a bunch of SNP MPs just recently, got Labour instead. That's a problem culturally with Scotland, that they think they only have two options. But to be fair, they don't really have many good options there. So the Tories are all over the place, and the Reform UK is still not really a large party to be able to change people's minds in Scotland, so they end up going between the SNP, the Labour Party, and the Scottish Greens, which is so sad. It says, unfortunately, the corruption in British politics is out of control. It's obvious nothing will come out of this investigation because he has the race card. It's not just the race card. It's what I said earlier about these type of politicians and left-wing parties are protected by the establishment because they've all infiltrated the establishment, civil service, and all these quangos and everything else. That's the other reason that they get protected. Nicola Sturgeon is another one. Nicola Sturgeon is a white woman, and even she's protected. So it goes beyond the race card. Obviously, the race card, they do play that all the time, but the whole thing is corrupt, on top of everything else that we deal with. But we're going to keep an eye on this story. If the mainstream media are not doing their job, 2CTV will continue to keep an eye on it, and we'll let you guys know if anything come out of it. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.